everyone for coming today. It is May 2nd, 2022, slightly after 4:30 p.m. And this is the Sylvania Development Committee. So in terms of a quorum, we have Janet, Mike, Johnny, and then we have Mark and Gail online on Zoom. And then for non-voting members, we have Bob and Jen. And Julie's going to be here in just a bit, but she's just handling something. Before going any further, are there any adjustments to the agenda? Bob?
No, I don't really have any. Did you want to talk about Carl's report on the house?
That was going to be under old business.
It's already on there, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we want to talk at all about the results of our discussion concerning the substation and whether anything has come of that, or there's anything more to report?
I don't have anything more to report on that item.
Okay. I guess I'm just concerned a little bit about follow-up. We had some things on there we were going to do.
So
I think one was to contact CMP and the other was to come up with a list of projects in Waldeboro that weren't solar related, that would require or could require.
So for C, we'll talk about, so substation in general, is that what the,
Yeah, I guess that's my,
Next steps.
Yeah.
okay. So that'll be 5C substation.
And I guess, marking trails, that was discussed at the last meeting too.
D trails. Okay. So I have 5C substation, 5D trails. Any other items? Not seeing any. Okay. First is citizens' comments. I don't see anyone here in the town office. I'm quickly pulling up the YouTube video to make sure that there's no one online. I'm seeing none. So minutes, April 4th, 2022.
Looking for a motion to approve them.
Do I hear a second? Janet? All right. All in favor?
I don't think I can vote. I wasn't here, right? So I can't.
Johnny's abstaining.
Yeah, I'm abstaining.
Mark and Gail? 2 hands up. Okay. All right. Old business, Hoff's house status. So everyone likely received a document that Carl provided from his tour with me on April 5th, 2022. Carl and I just simply walked through the house, looked through it, and in summary, Carl said it's solid building. It can be fixed. It's just going to take quite a bit of money to do so. But right now, the main concerns were the ones that I think I mentioned with Matt as well. There's the dormer issue, where that's pretty much where all the water damage is coming from. And then where the tree fell, there is a bit of a hole on there. And I could actually send out pictures following this meeting to show where there is some light mold that's happening. And that was the main issues, and obviously some interior cleanup. I mean, in terms of what to do next, I also spoke with Max from Maine DEP just to ask him about, because that was one of the things that was mentioned last time, what can we even do with this building?
Mhm.
And Max Lewick didn't really want to give any specific examples. He sort of sums it up as, we give him a suggestion and he tells us if it's good. Like, he doesn't have a list right in front of him that says what can and can't be done. I asked him about restaurant. I asked him about offices. He said all those sound fine, but I'm just telling you that the idea is fine. I did ask him out of inquiry about amending the covenant so that residential people could actually live there, because that was something that was discussed very briefly. And he said what would be involved is an environmental consultant to tour the building and confirm that it is not a health hazard for someone to live there, and that they would not be on private septic and well systems so that they would not be impacted by the potential contaminants. And also to not, and I sort of outlined what would happen. So we would get an environmental consultant and sort of chop off a bit of the land so that whoever would be at the Hoff's house, if residential was an option, they wouldn't own anywhere close to that plume that we've been talking about. So it's all possible. The amending of the covenant is possible, but it's a matter of getting in a consultant to confirm that. And that was something that Carl and I also discussed near the end. Whether we're interested in finding someone to lease the building for commercial uses and they'd fix it up, or going through the amendments so that someone can live there as a private residence and then they can fix it up. All our options that the DEP haven't really knocked down. Johnny?
Max, when you walked through the building and you said you spotted mold,
Yes.
was the mold, again, only because I've been dealing with it for 35 years and I know its health implications are many and at times severe. If that mold is in there, which my sensibilities tell me it's in,
Mhm.
trying to remediate that would seem to me would be like a huge investment or, I mean, just to try to get it all.
Mhm.
So a person could say, I could go in there and breathe without an N95 mask, or
Mhm.
it just seems to me that I just rode by that building, matter of fact, today, and it just, I don't know, it just looks like it's old and like anything you did to it would be putting good money after bad. I mean, it's just my opinion.
Mhm.
Well, that's sort of a decision that we have to make. The Gray School comes to mind, in which the town did a lot of work and still doesn't have any return on that investment that we made. So I'm thinking a private developer. We advertise, list it on the
Open
on
market.
a real estate site and basically identify all of the problems that exist there. And, you know, a private entity would come in and he would assess the mold and assess the water damage, and put those things into his brain or her brain and come up with a proposed price to buy the property, knowing that he may not get a permit from DEP. Now, we may not get a lot of money for it, but we didn't buy it for a lot of money though either. We got it for nothing. So just putting that little bit of housing stock back into circulation and back on the tax rolls would be an advantage to listing it
Mhm.
with all of the information that we have and seeing whether we get any bids.
I like that idea. I'm actually, the covenant says no residential anywhere on the property, so I do feel like we have to,
It would have to be amended.
yes, we have to amend it if we're going to put it on the market. So that's an option, I think. In terms of mold, having dealt with the Waldo Theater, which was horrible.
You
mold
had
issue.
a lot of mold in there.
An old building,
Yeah,
chances
yeah.
are it's not tight. I don't think
Right.
mold's going to be a serious problem there personally. That's older structures generally don't have the problems new ones do with, water barriers and stuff.
How did you address the mold issue at the theater? Was there a company that did a remediation?
Well, we actually had an estimate, would have been
Yeah.
hundreds of $1,000s to do it. But then what we did is we improved the drainage around the exterior. We got rid of all the water in the basement
Right.
because the sump pumps hadn't been working for years. And
Gotcha.
once we did that, the mold, it basically abated. We thought we were gonna have to replace the
Right.
cloth on the seats, but after vacuuming, there were just no issues. We tested it, but
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, does some entity have to come in and test the air quality as to black mold, green mold, to see if it's safe for people to come in? Or how is that addressed?
you don't have to do that. I mean, but over we felt like once we got rid of the moisture,
That's it.
and then we had to repaint with
I
mold,
see.
it just isn't an issue. But with an old building, just I've done a lot of energy audits over the time. You generally don't have the air circulation problems you have unless you have a sump, a basement full of water. I don't know if that's the case at Haas's, but I think the bigger issue is amending the covenant so that it can be used for something, because it's pretty restrictive here. And then
Yeah.
if we can, then putting it on the market, someone might love to restore that building if it can be used for something. Otherwise, it's got to come down if it can't. So the bottom line is going to max, maybe we brainstorm, could it be used for a residence? Yes, no, if we can amend this, could it be a?
You're talking about Max Luick, right?
Yes. Yeah, sorry. I wish you could just do that, but I think that's the big issue. And
Right.
in the interim, I feel like we did recommend that at least some plastic be put over the dormers and where the tree hit, so that it doesn't continue to have moisture. And that's the first thing we did with the Waldos. We put plastic over the annex where the water was leaking in, and that gave us time. And that front board that's not there where the steps are, I mean, things can go in, just to seal it. That stuff would cost much money, So at least that buys us a little time, and then see if we can work with DP. But yeah, I think we have to come up with, yes, it can be used for X, Y, and Z, and if not, then it's gonna have to be demolished, unfortunately. I mean, like it's kind of, we just need the permission. But I'm curious about liability. If, for say, we amend the covenant and it can be used for residence or some sort of business, whatever. Does the town have any, if, say, there are
If you-
contaminants that start percolating up through the basement or something, which,
If you're, generally, there's no liability incurred if you identify the hazards that are on the site. And if everything's above board, I don't think you incur too much in the way of liability.
I'm assuming it would be led, if they did find that, like, still remember the Michael Lang thing he sent from the New York Times about houses over these contaminants, it can actually come up into the air, not just from the well. So as long as there's no plume under there, we're fine. But if for some reason there were, then to me, that would be a risk. So I'm assuming Leadvance would be responsible for that risk, just because it came with the property. But
Well, Leadvance might argue that.
well, they've said they
argue
tested
against
the
that.
well, but if there's a plume under there, they are responsible for that plume, right?
Yeah.
As long as we didn't create it or anything.
Yeah, as long as we
Yeah,
didn't
it's their
create the
stuff.
problem.
They're responsible for it.
But if we're changing this and selling something, knowing there's someday potentially a risk, I mean, it seems very unlikely that given the direction of the plume, but I don't know.
But it's not going to come in with the groundwater, right? Because it's on town water. Is it on town sewer as well?
Well, drinking water won't be an issue, but that article Michael sent, which is somewhere on that timeline we had, it was about these exact same chemicals
Mhm.
being able to come, if there were a plume underneath, it could
Mhm.
come up through I assume it's a dirt basement and into the air. And I don't know enough, maybe maybe Max would know the answer that, no, that's not a risk, even if the plume did eventually go under the building.
Well-
Not other Max.
Well, and again, that's the thing that Max Luick said, that there would have to be an environmental consultant brought in specifically to say that type of thing
Okay.
on written document as a third party person. They don't see any health risk. And then at that point, it's not really our liability. It's now this person who was going out and looked at the house and said, oh yeah, it's fine.
We might be able to use the current company that follows that plume.
Hmm.
I mean, we
The
might be able
engineering
to hire
company,
them
yeah.
as knowledgeable people.
Or to
to-
certify, because they in
Yeah.
theory tested the wells and,
Yep, to certify that the plume is not under that house and will never be under that house because of the flow,
yeah,
the direction it's going.
that would be reassuring.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't think we have that.
No, and not to beat a dead horse, Sylvania didn't buy the property because it was contaminated. They bought it long before this was known because they wanted to expand.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's why they bought it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a contaminated well or anything. They just bought it because they wanted the property to expand, which means they would have taken the house down.
Right.
Which is interesting because, as far as the house goes, but the two wells farther down on that property are contaminated.
Right,
So,
but when they
Right.
bought it in the sixties, they had no idea.
right,
Right.
so, yeah, so that is an issue though, for the
Yep.
property itself.
Bob, do you know what is the company you're referring to? Is it something, is it essentially a
Sanborn
Sanborn?
Yes,
Engineering.
Are they,
Sanborn had, yeah.
and were they hired by Leadvance or DEP
they're
to,
hired by Leadvance,
okay.
And they're the ones who give the annual reports to us.
and they
or you-
continue to do them.
And to
as long as
DEP, yeah,
Yeah,
so that would be the logical.
I
thing.
don't know that they have a conflict. I mean, they'd have to figure that out.
I mean, the other person we could go to, if for some reason there's an issue there, is ask Joe Guarnacha for some thoughts on it.
Good
And
idea.
I don't think he
Yeah.
would do this kind of work, but he could do.
He'd
this kind of-
recommend somebody if he couldn't.
Yeah,
I recall years past when we first started, and we used to get those printouts from the wells. And I remember, I forget who the person was, but I asked, you'd see every quarter, TCE would be, I'm just gonna throw a number out, 2.1, 2.4. And then you'd see one where it was 5.6. And I remember I asked the gentleman, and I wish I could remember, I don't know if you remember, Bob, but I said, how does that happen? And as I recall, and I've got it somewhere in my notes, because I got every handout I ever had in the 3 years there. But he said, well, and I'm no hydrologist or whatever, but he said, to all of your points, water and land shift, they change, water changes directions. And he said somehow that could involve, maybe these barrels that have ruptured or pockets of it, and it could redirect the contaminant. So that to me would be a wild card if if someone was to, could someone go in there and say, you will never get anything going under that building forever or for 100 years or whatever. And that's the liability piece.
Well, even if the worst thing were to happen, there are technical means. If the plume should shift and the chlorinated hydrocarbons were coming up through the basement, there are, it's just like a radon system. If you have radon in your basement, you install a fan and you just, and you get it out of your house. And they even make energy efficient ones now with heat exchangers. So you're not continuing to heat that air that you're pulling out of the basement. I was actually over at, looking at a house in Thomaston, potentially for my sister, and they had one of those in the basement.
So
I don't see the environmental liabilities as being as precluding the sale of this property. If they don't have to put in a new septic system, if there's an existing septic system,
guessing
or
they
if they're
will.
on sewer, and if they have a water line, I don't see any technical environmental problem that would preclude the sale of the property to somebody who wanted to build it as a residence too, or take it as a residence. We can't discuss this forever because doing nothing means we're demolishing it by neglect.
Right.
So if it was me, I would want to put it on the market as soon as we could, without the imprimatur of the state DEP, because as Max noted, he was reluctant to commit.
But we can't sell it as a residence without amending this, so we have to involve DEP.
We wouldn't, if we didn't own it anymore, the new owner would have to deal with DEP.
And they'd have to deal with Leadvance if a problem came up, because
Correct.
Leadvance is
Correct.
on the hook
That would be a
in
deterrent.
perpetuity.
Yeah.
If any of that contaminant is found anywhere on the property, not just under the house, they're on the hook.
I just feel like it'd be such a deterrent. I wouldn't buy a place if
No,
I knew I had to deal with DEP,
I concur.
I feel like finding out if we can use it as well, is it on town sewer?
Sorry?
So perhaps so that discussion stops, how about I call both? Yeah, I'll call both the utility district and main water just to confirm that there is both.
Because they're not allowed to disturb the soil, so you couldn't put a septic system necessarily.
Right.
If it does, if it's on town sewer, we're
Correct.
fine. So that'd be good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's on town sewer. I just think
No.
it's town water.
I'll confirm.
So if we're not allowed to dig, then our only option is demolition by neglect.
Yeah, or connecting it to town sewer.
You gotta dig to get that sewer line in.
But you can dig,
Yeah.
you can dig if you have advance written permission from DEP. So
Right.
again, that's a question we'd want to ask. if we
And
could
that
put
would
a
be
septic-
from the street into
Yeah.
the,
Right.
And
I just
it's a,
It would just,
what is it, 30 feet? You know,
I don't see that
30
being
feet
a
of
risk.
digging,
Yeah, I just
you
don't see
could
that.
probably directionally drill it from inside the basement
Exactly.
without disturbing any
Yeah.
soil.
But I take your point that, yeah, if we don't do something to it this summer,
Right.
at least shore it up. We're condemning it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think we could make a decision today to put the tarps over the holes, fill that front thing, just do that. And then hopefully, get a little more information on
utility status and
the
everything.
utility status. And then, I still feel like it'd be good to get the okay to use it for residential from DEP. I think that would allow us to sell it more easily somehow. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can't imagine a house without knowing this.
For that to happen, we would just need to get a environmental consultant to confirm that.
Yeah.
So I can ask DEP if they have
Okay,
recommendations.
so there's two things that are gonna cost the town money.
Right.
Yep.
The roofing
Yep.
temporary
But
fix.
that might be $500, but still.
You can't do anything for $500 these days.
Yeah.
Not by a professional roofing company that's bonded, licensed and insured. That's not gonna happen. They
We
won't.
Public Works put the tarp up?
Yeah, we just put the tarp up ourselves in the wall, though. I mean, I'm just talking that quick fix. with
This is
that.
2 stories.
Yeah.
They've got a bucket.
They've
the
got a
wall
bucket.
is- Yeah, I mean, to me, it's
If they got a
that,
bucket,
Yeah, they got a bucket.
if they are safe to do it, I would say put that up.
It's possible. You
And
have
the
to
other
check
thing
with their
is-
boss, but
yeah,
you
it's
know.
worth a check.
And the other thing is
Right.
the environmental consultant.
Yep.
Now, what would we want an environmental consultant to do? What, you have to define a scope of services.
And that's what I'd have to have the DEP specifically lay out, like the exact items that need to be checked marked so that we can have this as residential.
And yeah, the assumption is we would be marketing for residential use,
Mhm.
right?
Does it have to necessarily be residential?
I was
mean,
about
was
to-
just thinking, what about a museum?
Yeah, no.
I love that building.
Well-
Like I said, like a museum, to tell about Waldeboro's history, his
Well-
century, the 5-masted schooner, for God's sakes, that went all over the world. Waldeboro's got a rich Germanic history. And nope, I don't know, except Gene, who knows everything. We don't promote that.
Well, it'd be nice to have options, but we
Sure.
can't decide whether it's going to be a museum. I mean, putting it on the market, I mean, ideally,
Right.
it could be for residential, it could be business, so they
Well,
could be.
it'd be
sold.
Yeah, I just threw that
sold.
out there just to have a couple of options in
Yeah.
case someone,
Yeah, it'd be nice to not be pigeonholed if possible, just be able to put it on the market and see.
No, right. Well, right now it's zoned industrial, so if someone wants to do it for residential use, we'd have to amend the zoning ordinance to do that, but I mean, that's not an
That's
expense.
within the town itself.
That's within the town, and that's just a quick vote where I don't think anyone would have an issue, because changing it from what would it be industrial to like residential.
Or commercial, or does industrial include commercial?
Yeah, zoned industrial means it pretty much has all commercial items and industrial items. It's just residential. It's not really allowed.
Yeah.
But-
So we gotta do that.
But changing it is just something we could do on any town meeting. It's not really that expensive. It's a few bucks, and I would assume if you had to weigh the cost benefits, few bucks, less than 100, just that for advertisements alone, versus then putting it back on the tax roll, as you're saying. I don't see anyone voting no against that,
Right. Yeah, everyone just wants to see it saved.
and assume that it is within the environmental consultant says it is safe to live there, and the DEP then amends the covenant as well. But no, it could be for anything, really. I'm just talking about the path for residential isn't necessarily closed. It is just going to be a bit,
We
there
have
is
to
a
amend
cost
that.
to it.
We have to amend that, so.
Yeah.
Well, if the environmental consultant asked DEP about any use, they'd be advising us on any commercial or residential use, presumably, right? Not just one of those.
Right. And again, DEP doesn't want to say, pick this one, that's the one you should go with. It's more of, we tell them what we think we want to do, and then they'll tell us what has to be done.
Yeah. So if you ask also if we could use Sanborn to do it, I assume that's still the consultant, but for the engineering company.
So I will ask DEP about Sanborn pathway for residential, and also check with Public Works about putting on some temporary coverings. Anything else for Haas's house? Seeing none. Public input survey. Just before the meeting, I was told that Mark and Gail are still working on it. So what we're going to do is try and have it sent out between now and maybe June, so we can still have it ready to just be handed out to people who come to the polls on June 14th for the actual election day.
So we'll get something to review from.
Just need a little bit,
Bill and Mark.
Yep.
Okay.
a little more time is going to be needed on that. Then the new items, unless there's anything else for public input or survey. Seeing none. So old business,
Has
oh.
there been a draft created yet?
there was the
that we
draft,
could review?
there was the draft I
know
sent
that
last week.
The first
or
draft. that
last
you
month.
sent.
No, I don't have it. We don't have any
We
updated draft.
don't have an,
But when it is ready, it will be sent out to all members through email, and then we may just need people to give their thoughts before the June meeting here. So we can print enough in time. All right. Substation. So Bob, can you talk a little bit more about what you were thinking of with substation?
Well, my recollection at the April meeting was that we thought we needed to maybe make a list of projects we see coming down the road that have nothing to do with solar, but do represent additional demands on the substation as is, and present those to CMP and tell them they need to upgrade the substation. And I see a cart before the horse thing here. I mean, they're probably gonna say, well, we've heard you got some solar projects going in Waldeboro. They're gonna have to pay for this because they're gonna create the demand. And I think our response to that has to be, no, we may or may not have solar projects, but we for sure are gonna have a medical arts building and some other facilities in town that are new and that are gonna create new demands, not to mention the industrial part, the business part,
All right.
and what's going on there. So you guys need to get your act together and resize that to look to the future.
Okay.
And see what we can accomplish with them. And is this something we go through the PUC with?
They were suggesting CMP directly.
Yeah, they
remember that
were.
Sundog,
Yeah, Danny was
Danny.
suggesting CMP.
although I wonder, and what about, there was a bill passed in the legislature that I haven't followed it closely enough, but it was tied to infrastructure. Did you follow that? It was an important bill according to the solar industry, but I don't know.
State or federal?
See, I don't think it is saying put money into substations, but it was definitely about expanding infrastructure for renewables. So I could look into that, I guess, but I don't know.
I think I saw something in the Press Herald about, I don't know, I think it was a couple weeks ago, but CMP and solar, they, because of the rising costs and all that, they said several solar projects are either going to be in jeopardy or going to be changed just because of the increase and how, the cost benefit thing. But it was a very good article and it gave me pause. I just remedy it, yeah. Because there's the CMP, like it just distinctly said that a lot of solar projects, there's gonna be some additional discussion because the price now is so high.
Mhm.
So I don't know how that plays into anything here, but it's something I think.
I think it had to do with tariffs on Chinese components that are installed in the panels.
Right.
They're not allowed to be imported into this country. Is that the article you're talking
You know,
about?
Bob, I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly. I just knew that there was issues that are going to conflate with pricing, building and all that. It could have very well.
That's the one I recall most recently. And if you're not allowed to import Chinese components, whether they're part of something or intended to be part of something, you don't have supply. You have nothing to
Right.
sell.
Right.
And that was a major concern.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
That's the only one I could think of that recently that,
Solar panels are more expensive. They've
oh, yeah.
Gone up
They
considerably.
put a 200% tariff on these components or they just don't allow them in.
Mhm.
And you've got a real problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, but well, we could see if anything happened, but my guess is it's going to be, everyone knows about this infrastructure issue, so hopefully we'll figure out a way to address it.
But it's a capacity issue in the
Yeah.
substation, I think, that deserves our focus here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I believe I did send out an email to Danny where I tried to contact him before this meeting just to see if he had his the name from someone from CMP he would refer us to. I haven't heard back from him, but I'll try again following this meeting or tomorrow at least. But was there any other? So Bob, you're saying put together a list of projects that aren't solar, but something that's going to require a lot of.
That will
Electric
require
use.
additional demand.
Okay.
Yeah. And that impede the economic development of the town if CMP doesn't step up.
Any other thoughts from anyone?
Just one note, I went down and looked at the substation, and one of the things that we had talked was ways to bump up the capacity of a substation. And I would say that it looked like a very nice job. They even have squirrel protection so that squirrels don't short out the transformer, which I thought was kind of unique. I had never seen that before, but it didn't have the things that we were talking about, like cooling fans and things like that, so that you can increase the capacity of a substation quickly and cheaply. It looked like that might be a candidate if this is something that CMP wanted to do.
Okay.
It would, the other piece that would be good to know from the CMP rep, I guess, is what's in the queue for solar right now and what upgrades are being proposed, if they're going to be putting extra capacity, the people that are upgrading it. But just so we know, at least in the short term, what's planned. CMP has
Max,
absolutely zero motivation.
at our last meeting, did someone mention that we were going to raise this issue with the Economic Development Committee and have kind of a joint proposal to try and upgrade did it come up at the last
You're
EDC
right,
meeting?
Mark.
And
That
that
was
was your,
discussed.
your point.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was talked about. And
Yep.
we're having an EDC meeting
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Yep. And so tomorrow I'll try and have a list of projects and see if there's anything else from the EDC. And then that can just be shared with everyone in this committee on Thursday.
Yep.
See if anyone has any other thoughts.
Another question I had, and Bob, maybe you can answer this. What kind of communication is there between small towns and municipalities? Because I'm sure we're not the only one that is facing this impediment to sort of economic development. Is there anything to be made about strength in numbers if there's a coalition of towns or communities that want to have CMP come in and do some infrastructure update? Is there anything to gain from that kind of approach?
Well, I'm glad you said that because you're making me think about maybe a role for the Maine Municipal Association to play. They could do a survey
That's a good idea.
Hmm.
They have, every town in Maine practically belongs to the association. It's there for insurance mostly, but they do other stuff and they do legislative stuff. So there's a good issue for them to look into and maybe do a survey on as a service to their membership to see what comes out of it.
And how
That's
about-
a good
Any
idea,
kind of allies in the state house, in the state Congress that could be pitchmen for us?
You're talking about the
We are-
national level?
And I'm talking about state level even,
You're
just
talking about
somebody who
state level.
can
They do have a legislative
lobby,
liaison. They have a legislative liaison, someone who follows all the bills. Actually, it's not just someone, it's a whole group of people who follow the bills. There's a legislative policy committee that the MMA has. It's very active during legislature time. And they will sometimes take positions on bills. So, yeah,
So yeah, probably asking MMA and getting them. Is that something you want to do, or do you want me to do?
well, I
it?
can do it, but I think it's better coming from the town. You know,
Right.
I think it has more.
So I'll do that.
They're
I'll
not-
get
Yeah,
that done.
I then can't be accused of just making noise.
The Lincoln County Planning Commission too, are they were talking about this? I don't know if you already have.
I mean, you're right, it's a statewide problem. It's not just this region, it's everywhere.
Well, that's what Danny was saying.
I think it definitely would be good to at least start with MMA. In terms of Lincoln County, I think I was actually just talking with them earlier today, so wish I knew this was coming up. I think they might be interested in talking about it, but I think I think going for the entire state as opposed to just our county would
Yeah.
probably be a lot more impactful.
Well, Max, I'm going, as you know, the 10th at 4:30. I'll be at the Bangor Auditorium for that 4-hour seminar with the MMA.
Yeah.
So maybe I
For
can.
planning board,
Yes, maybe I can broach the subject with them. or
They might have
something.
something.
Absolutely, and it's a
Yeah.
planning issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
So how do you mobilize communities around this planning issue?
Yeah. Community, okay, yeah. That'll-
Great opportunity.
but yeah, Bob will talk afterwards, and you can just give me the name of someone so that
Kathy Conlon.
hopefully no one's watching this, and then she gets all the spam. Okay. All right. So the direction is to approach MMA and talk with Danny a bit more to see who he would suggest from CMP. Any other items for the substation? All right. And now trails.
actually, Max, can somebody clarify where the substation is?
So at the intersection with Moody's and Borealis Breads.
Yeah.
So if you are traveling south on Route 1, so Moody's is on your left and you're heading for the town office, you just passed the intersection. It's like right after Borealis Breads, isn't it? Yeah. Right after Borealis Breads, look at the right and there's the substation.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so that trails. I don't think I'd talk too much with the Conservation Commission about this. I did well, at least at their meeting. I did briefly talk about this with the chair. It's a good idea. You know, obviously if there are volunteers interested in doing it, then that'd be great to have on there. The Midcoast Conservancy also seemed interested, or at least Carl was interested in participating as well. Mike, was there anything more you wanted to discuss on the trails?
Well, yeah, just rather than just talking about things, I'm trying to
Do it.
move the ball down the field. I think everybody wants to have
Mhm.
this extremely valuable property down by the river
Mhm.
to become publicly available.
Right.
And I tried to use it, and I was thwarted on the north end because the brambles were so bad. But just I'm looking for a next step, somebody to step up, whether, you know, if it's just me, that's fine. I'll go down there with a chainsaw as long as I have a agreement from the committee to do so. But there was a decided preference to involve the Conservancy or the Conservation Commission and all of these things. Are these stumbling blocks or are they partners? I guess is the way I'm looking at it.
Well, the reason I wanted to talk with the Conservation Commission first was because you want to do as they say, if there are volunteers, that's great because they have some who are just focused on the ones that are already in town. And while they always do like to have these types of big opportunities, it's always a question of then who's there after they're built and done, and then who's going to monitor them. So they said it's still good. And I mean, there's going to be time until the trails are probably ready for everyone to start using it. So I'll talk with Public Works, especially Will Pratt, and see what if you two could probably talk about this, and maybe he'll say, yeah, if you want to go.
Somebody can just put yellow flagging.
Yep.
Where a trail would be, or maybe just the perimeter of the property. You know, I'll get on and make the trails myself. I mean, I'm retired. And I've been busy this week, but.
Say it colloquially too, you know?
Well, I feel like we need one step in between. I mean,
Okay, well, it's
which
fine.
is to maybe talk again to, or Madonna Council, which is Mid-Coast Conservancy
Conservancy.
has, and see if their trail crew, and we need a commitment by somebody to maintain it. I mean, yeah, you could, but there needs to be either the town conservation commission says, yes, we want more trails and we'll put this into our thing and we'll help make sure there's volunteers to maintain it. And there needs to be some structure, or it could, like the 80 grade trail fell by the wayside for quite a while. It's been.
I just walked that for the first time.
Isn't it neat?
You like
It's a cool.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
It's such a cool trail.
Yeah.
But so if we could see if that trail crew, which Charlie Witherell and a whole bunch.
Charlie, and is Tim Trumbull involved in that?
Tim
For
Trumbull,
Mid-Coast, does he work at the Nature Center quite a bit?
maybe, and
But
Dean
He's the
Collins-
liaison with Mid-Coast, between
Bennett
the
Collins
council
is
and
now the-
Mid-Coast, Tim
the-
Trumbull.
Well,
Yeah, but Charlie's trail crew,
are
I mean,
great.
they do this all the time. They go out, they mark trails, they maintain them, they cut them. You ought to be a member of that.
Yeah, you should join
What are you
it,
doing?
but I do feel like,
I'm already on 3 committees, Bob.
when I retire, I'm gonna join the trail. But I do think that we need somebody who's laid out a lot of trails to lay out the trail. We can't just say, okay, let's put it here, because it's a lot of soft.
Well, I don't want to go
around.
on somebody else's property.
No,
That's,
well, not that, more like where's the good, what's the soil like here, how steep of a grade,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just those kinds of things. Having Charlie's crew
Mhm.
come in and
Yeah,
help lay
it's
it
an
out.
art more than a science.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not like, okay, let's just put it there. I mean, if, in terms of the maintenance, if you don't want to have.
Do you know
like the-
Charlie, Max?
he lives right in
Personally,
town.
no,
No?
but
Well,
yeah,
Mid-Coast Council, I mean, Madonic Council, we could, if they'd agree to take this on,
I can't see them saying no.
I could broach it with them if you want.
Question. I'm sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting, but this trail thing, tell me, I walked 4 or 5 years ago down to Peters Pond.
Mhm.
And I almost died because I got lost. But what's the process of making a trail? I mean, does the town say, or somebody say, well, we want a trail down there and do it, or how does?
well,
that-
usually you wind up putting blazes on the trees.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
a stripe of paint or whatever. And make sure that there's no brambles, there's no logs that you have to climb over,
Right.
stuff like that.
But-
I'm not
but-
talking about
yeah.
putting in stairs or bridges
Right,
or
right.
anything
Well,
like
there might
that.
have to be some little ones.
Yeah, there might be, but.
And we have to make sure we avoid the wellheads and stuff. So there are some things that, you know,
would have to be considered.
yeah.
How did the Conservation Commission put the trail into the town forest up there on the top of the hill?
That was already there.
Yeah,
Somebody did it,
Ted Worcester.
Ted Worcester did it, yeah,
did he?
Yeah,
pretty much.
but he did it in a way that actually went onto other people's property.
Did.
Yeah, so you-
So it's still a good trail. It's just a trail that we partially don't own.
Yeah.
But I think involving, if Mid-Coast is willing,
Yeah.
they put in trails, and then their crew does, and then we'd have the expertise and could get a volunteer crew to help them do it. I just
And
feel
then
like having that is a good idea. to
And
do
then
it.
get Mike as a new.
Yeah, get Mike as the new.
Yeah.
They have a lot of fun, apparently.
They do.
So
Is there
I'll,
beer involved?
Probably.
well, hold on.
Max,
Mark? Yep.
yeah, sorry. I just want to confirm, are the active wells enclosed and secure somehow at this point?
Yeah, most of the wells are sampling wells and there are pipes that stick up out of the ground and there is a padlock on them.
Okay. Do we need to have like any kind of fencing around them if we're going to put trails back there to keep people away from tampering or messing with them somehow?
I can only speak of one other location where I know there are monitoring wells, and that was outside of Otis Air Force Base, where they had a similar problem with chlorinated solvents. And those wells are just left untended all the time.
I mean,
Okay,
this
so
says you
They're
can't,
sampled regularly, but they don't do any maintenance or
Okay.
anything like that on them.
the covenant says you can't disturb them, but it doesn't say you can't put trails in. I mean, I think as long as you locate them
Right.
so that they're not right there in front of you,
Mhm.
ideally so you don't see them. I think that would be ideal.
Would certainly be a good idea to make sure they are still at least closed off and someone doesn't just come across it and do
Yeah,
something bad.
but yeah, ideally locate the trail so they're not in your line of sight. But yeah, that's a good idea.
So
Can we get one of those fake rocks to put over the top?
fake rocks.
Yeah, they do sell those. They do.
Probably some.
Yeah, I know.
Driving by today, there were two large industrial trucks down in the site. I don't know what they were doing, but they were cylindrical and they were back to back, and I haven't, what do they do down there? They were like 200 feet off the road where the cover is, and they were just kind of,
Was
Park.
it south of the slab or north of the slab?
it was south, heading down towards
The
the
way
river. Yeah, and it was just funny because it was two odd shaped big trucks, and they were back to back, and I was a little curious, but I don't know, what do they do? I mean, is there some measuring, monitoring company that goes down there and
There is.
does, and so they periodically just
Mm.
park and take samples?
Well, they have a carbon system down there. Maybe they're recharging the carbon, who knows?
Yeah.
They would factor it out and then
Yeah.
replace it with new carbon.
And the engineering company comes once a year at this point. They used to
Yeah,
come
they-
4 times a year, but.
Okay.
So it might be them too. I don't know.
Is there any role here for the select board to set some parameters down?
for trails.
Well, to sanction the whole thing and to get behind it so that it,
Probably not yet. That's what this committee is all about, just taking these ideas and then going to the select board later.
Hey, we do want to say, this section, we want to have the open space. We haven't really designated that. And also, I'm wondering timing wise, if we wait till the survey stuff, we can do our research to make sure there's a group on board to do the trail work, but make sure the town does want to see a trail there. I'm assuming they do. And then we can,
Yeah, and I mean, the idea was to have trails just in the shoreland zone and even the setbacks, because you can't build anything there anyways.
you don't want to be too close. I mean, I know where I live, which is that same soft shore. There's a lot of erosion. I mean, I do think it should be farther back than 75 feet or whatever the shoreline zone. is.
Shoreland zone's 250 feet,
250, okay.
and that's going all the way back. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and that was just at a minimum. You can always go a bit more inland too.
That's the other thing, I've done a lot of recommendations of trail locations for my work. And, usually you locate them, not just because you can't do anything there.
Right.
Because there's some cool thing you want to look at. It might be a group of trees or a view from a ravine, or have one point where it touches to the shore so you get a view of the water or whatever. So I feel like, we should, and I'd be willing to, to spend a day seeing if there's some cool stuff, or we could all do that. But, I just feel like you have to locate it carefully.
But yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be completely limited between setback and shoreland. I'm saying at a minimum, that was what was just
Okay.
suggested.
Yeah.
Just that we're not going to develop the shoreland essentially.
Mhm. Yeah, and we obviously have to figure out where to go to the park and wherever people are gonna park and, so it's worth, and you said all the brambles are over here. On this line.
Yeah, actually right here, it was just brutal getting down through, there's a stone wall and this was all full of brambles.
Floor rows,
Yeah.
kind of prickly stuff.
Yeah, it was multiflora rose, it was blackberries, it was,
Be sure to walk down through here.
Yeah,
and
so
then
this,
walk back.
we need to just figure out, is the
And then
trail
walk
gonna
back up.
do a loop or
Yeah,
one touch? We're recommending now that you don't just follow the shore with a trail. But yeah, so I think, or get Midcoast to come and help advise.
Yeah, I'll chat with Will. I'll send an email to Will just before I head out today. Just seeing if he has what has happened down there for trails and if there's an issue with Midcoast Conservancy and other people starting to go down there. And then I would assume it's going to be, yeah, as long as they accept the risk, then they can go ahead. But I'll confirm that with him and John Bagel.
It could be like there's some vernal pools down there, and you don't want to put the trail near that. And there could be some things you want to avoid. Or whatever.
you want to avoid there. That's where I got stuck.
Really?
Yes.
Great, because of brambles or just?
No, that was, I went in over the tops of my shoes. Mud, very,
Oh,
very soft ground there.
okay.
you're very adventurous.
I'm gonna have to do
Here's your waders.
Sorry.
Shoreline would be. And shoreline would be like. I think that's about 250 wet out. So that's, again, that's just the minimum.
Yeah, but you got these big gullies here, so you're gonna want to do something like that, potentially,
I'm surprised that 75 feet is the setback for a trail. I'd have thought it would be.
Trails.
250 feet.
No. So
Wow.
shoreline zone just means that if you're within 250 feet of the high water mark, you just have to do a special permit and
So you're
and
not
certain things are
trail going down.
right. And there's certain restrictions.
That's what I thought. Good.
And it's in the general, and that's actually the general development one where you could build a structure like 25 feet from the water, but I don't think we want that.
That's not something that
No,
we're looking.
maybe a little
bank.
bench that looks out to the water or something, but
yeah.
No.
Okay. But yeah, I'd love to have a trail crew come out.
all right. So Janet, did you say you were going to contact Midcoast Conservancy
Yeah.
or do you want me to do that?
I'm happy to, if you want. You have a lot on your plate.
If you want to reach out to them, that'd be good. And
Okay.
I'll reach out to Public Works.
Okay.
And so they would contact Max?
Yeah, I'll just see how it works,
Okay,
and if they're willing, if this, because they have a lot
yeah, they do.
to maintain, it might be they
Yeah.
aren't interested, but it'd be a great collaboration.
All right. Is there any other thoughts on trails?
Again, my only concern is that, does this require some kind of town vote?
Trails,
Some point. Under what authority are we doing this?
town known, and the trails are someone putting in a little marker or two. I think we can put everything. So I think what you're talking about. So Janet and I are going to put together the Midcoast Conservancy, Public Works, and Public Works has already been there cleaning up the area, looking at it.
Right.
So I think what you're talking about is maybe in 1 month, maybe by next meeting, Midcoast Conservancy would have a plan laid out with Mike to go out, do some trail work, and then maybe going to the select board to say, is it fine if people are down there?
So you're just talking about setting the course and nothing more than that at this point,
Yeah.
and not spending any money. or
No,
whatever.
I don't think we should.
No.
I personally feel like just to have the goodwill of the town, that we all need to agree and vote and say, yes, we think trail. And then the survey goes out and then,
And the material's already the Conservation Commission already has a lot of the materials that would be used.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
Oh, but just do the survey first and see what comes, we can propose that, this is one of the things we're considering and just see what the reaction is. And then, I don't know if it would need a vote or not. I guess that's for the select board to decide, but but just get the pieces in place. And we could just see if Midcoast is interested. My guess is they may not be able to do it this month, but we can find out we'll just find out what we can.
I
And
get it.
yeah.
I get where you're at. You're at the planning stage and that's
Yeah.
great.
Right.
No, you'll have a concept to give to the town or whoever it is.
Yeah.
yeah, it's passive recreation. I mean, it would be no different than when Johnny's doing his walks or runs and he just happens to go right on the property.
Yep.
Just a thought, probably a dumb question, but say these trails, say we like them and so forth, but could some townsfolk from Waldeboro say, I don't think we should have trails down there. I just don't like the idea. Would that cause any concern or anything? Or what if some people just objected just for whatever reason?
If the majority of people in the town did, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
Right. No, I wonder if there's any redress from, maybe people wouldn't like people parking or the traffic. I don't know.
I mean, that's part of the overall master plan that this committee is going to do to say what's going to happen to the site.
Right.
I mean, if it ends up being that people are saying we don't want any trails down there, then I guess no trails will be down there. They're just going to be decrepit old trails.
Right.
Yeah, I don't imagine, I think if we come up with a good plan, it is
Yeah,
the town's
yeah.
property. I can't imagine that.
If we're going to expend money, the voters could express their unhappiness with that and not approve that budget
Okay,
for it
that's what
That's
I'm trying to
true.
get at.
at a town meeting.
Right.
That would be their avenue to express displeasure.
And from what we've talked about so far, there's really no money, very little money involved.
Right.
Cleaning it up, maybe a couple of signs, maybe some stuff down on the path. That's it.
Yeah.
And so if they didn't like it and say, okay, yeah, we screwed up, it'll go back to nature like that,
Yep.
So does that answer the questions there? Any other questions? Or trails?
Want to fill Julie in on what we talked about?
I'm sorry, I had a
No,
issue I had to be dealing with.
no, it's all right. We've only just been waiting for an hour. So everyone back to the
I'm really
back to the
sorry.
start, back to the start, citizens' comments.
Right. No, just
It was important. It was important.
All right. Yeah, there's no new business and then comments from the committee. So I guess I'll just debrief you on it.
You
So
can do it later if you would like, unless there's something.
I was
new.
just talking about this conversation. about
trails?
Trail, that's all I was referring to
Oh.
at this point.
Bob was wondering if we need to do anything, like the select board has to do a vote or the town doing a vote for Midcoast Conservancy or Conservation Commission to just make some trails on Sylvania.
I think it should go at least before the select board.
yeah.
But planning wise, certainly the Conservation Commission, Midcoast, if they want to.
Right. Reach out.
And this group can put together a plan.
Right, and if you want to
So
work
where are
together
we-
with Midcoast, we can do an agreement.
And that's what I think we've come
We've
to.
done that in the past. with
Go to
them.
whom?
We've done an agreement with Midcoast.
Oh, okay.
It just makes it easy.
Yeah.
And that's the agreement I think we have going. Janet's
And
gonna
if we're
reach
gonna
out.
try to get any grant funding, it looks good if we have the Conservation Commission, the Sylvania Redevelopment Committee and Midcoast.
Midcoast behind it.
Yeah, and for them, it's just going to be a capacity issue.
Right.
They're stretched right
Yeah.
now, but grants, potential.
Yeah. So the discussion today, though, was really about figuring out what the trail is going to look like and where it's going to go.
And having expertise.
Once we have a concept, then we can write.
That's what we're gonna use Midcoast for, correct?
Yeah, yeah, then we can write grants and
Yeah.
do whatever we need to do to get it organized and get it going.
I think that's an excellent idea. Better than, Max going out there and trying to figure out where it should be.
I thought Will was the one who wanted to go out there.
Will is dying to get out there. and-
We'll involve Will.
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, I just shouldn't say Will, but the entire
They'd ha-
Conservation
yeah,
Committee is
no, that
excited.
would be
It
fun.
had John Daigle excited, and that doesn't happen often.
Wow. Sorry, I didn't
So-
mean to be so.
Plan was Janet will reach out to the concert, the Mid-Coast Conservancy, and I'm just
It's
gonna see
late
where
in the
Public
day.
Works, because I know they look down there, but I don't know
They
what they've
looked, and
actually done.
I know John had requested permission to start putting the trail in,
Hmm.
John and Will. And I was like, I don't know where it's going, so we're not gonna do anything. You know, they didn't want to rip up anything, but they wanted to mow so that you could see. They're thinking that if you mow certain area, you'll be able to very visually see where the trail is.
Well, that's where Janet comes in. I mean, she's got that contact with Midcoast and
And we can involve them with a
Yeah,
plan,
yeah.
you know, definitely.
Now-
That would be great.
You had mentioned
Joan
me
Ray might
volunteering.
even.
I would
Maybe.
volunteer to work on the initial trail, but as far as becoming part of the Midcoast Conservancy, I would not volunteer for that.
Okay.
But I would volunteer to be
If the town, yeah, whether Midcoast may not want to be
the
a steward.
chainsaw wielder.
Okay.
he wants to get out there with his chainsaw.
He wants to hack away at those multiple roses.
No, I mean, honestly, we do have the conservation committee's been doing a lot,
I know.
you know, they're getting very active.
I do think we need their, you know, just like a boat. Yes, we'll add this to our, this is not a pocket park. This is bigger.
But yeah,
So
and that-
just, you know, that, yes, we're excited about this and that, because
It came up the other night, Waldeboro Day is having their fireworks, and they were like, well, should we have them at 80 Gray? Should we have them at the fields? And I was like, Sylvania. And then I was like, no, probably not a good
we
idea.
can all sit on the slab.
But, you know, well, I think once we figure out what we're doing with the slab, but something like that might be, because somebody had asked, could we do it at, instead of, you know, that might be a nice alternative in the future to have
Yeah.
Waldeboro Day. If it's covered over in grass
Yeah.
or an electric go-kart track, or whatever.
Well, that brings up something we didn't address for business with the slab. And we talked about, we're allowed to cover it. But is that something we could save it for the next meeting? But I feel like we should talk.
We can
about that.
ask the DEP.
Yeah.
We can make a formal request to them,
But just what that cost, you know, just how do you figure that one out?
and we could probably get a grant for that. And did Carl come to this meeting?
But it would be another thing we could move on.
does the Public Works have a, what was it, box car or
Bucket.
bucket?
I mean, to
Like
actually
a
put the
car?
bent night or whatever it is. on.
Yeah,
Like
a
cherry
thing
picker
there.
bucket.
Oh,
Yeah.
like the hoist that you, to get onto the roof of the
Right.
hospice house. You know, one
They
of those
do.
lifts.
Well, we have a resident who allows us to use theirs. We have an agreement with the resident. What do they need to do?
To put plastic tarp to keep water from going.
Oh, we can ask John and Will about that tomorrow. As long as they wouldn't have to get out of the bucket.
nope.
No.
Well, how do you secure the tarp to the roof so that it doesn't blow away without getting out of the bucket?
Yeah, how does that work? Because at the wall though,
It-
we had to put.
It might
laths.
actually be safer for somebody with a ladder to do it
Yeah,
than a bucket truck.
it's not that big a deal. I don't know how that
We
works.
just-
You have liability issues.
We have
around that.
liability
Yeah.
issues using our employees for things they are not certified to do.
Could you have volunteers or that's fall
That's-
under the same bailiwick?
Kind of fall under the same. We might just have to have a contractor go out. But that's what needs to be done.
But it would be a pretty straightforward job. This isn't like-
You know who we could talk
There's
to,
roof.
who might be willing to do it is lives next to where the Reed Mansion used to be. Tom, no. Help me out.
Not Jim Derby.
Jim Derby.
He might, he's super busy, but he's the one who did it, I think, for the Waldo. I mean, he'd know right what to do.
Mm,
Could ask him.
We can check. That'll just be part of the next meeting. So ask DEP about the slab and then just update about Hoff's house.
We can ask Jim.
Yeah.
If
We're
you have
ready
his
now.
contact information, could you email it to me?
Yeah, I'll do that. I just know he's working at stores now. Pretty busy, but I'll give it to you. And he might be willing. He's done a lot of volunteer stuff, so.
Are there any other comments from the committee? Topics for next agenda, which will be June.
I can just see if Max wants to, from the DEP would come down.
To talk about,
Yeah, he hasn't seen us in so long.
yeah, and you're his buddy.
And I am, he likes me.
Max Lewick to show up.
Yeah.
To talk about the building more
just to-
specifically.
To talk about like covering
Oh, and the cap.
the cap. I think that would be,
That would be cool.
that would be good because he would tell us what they would be willing to approve. That way we're not just shooting in the dark.
Yeah. That,
Because he said no and then he said yes. So,
and ideas on who does it, and how much
Mm-hmm.
it costs and all that kind of stuff. Well, he may not know that. But
well,
Yeah.
he could
So
tell
the
us where
next
else they've
meeting's
done
on
it.
June 6th, Max?
Is that the first Monday? It is June 6th. And do we still want to do the 4:30 start time, or
Yeah, I don't want to do any earlier, but that's okay with you guys.
all right.
Well, last meeting, I had to work at the hospital, so later is a little better, but I actually had a trade this day. I could have worked today. But I felt I had a commitment and I was gonna keep it.
Well, when you say later, what do you mean?
Well, my shift generally goes from 6:30 AM. Supposedly we get out at 6:30 PM, but that's never the case. But
Yeah.
a lot of times I got a good group that I work with, so I can, sometimes just they let me out a little early.
So later is best for you.
Probably, I would say, for the most part, a little later would be a little better, but if that doesn't work, that's fine too.
All right. Well, we can stick to 4:30 PM at least for maybe one more month. And if people have some other time suggestions, they can.
Right, cool.
I only just asked about the time because not the Conservation Commission, the Communications Technology Committee, they used to meet at 5:30 on the
Yeah.
same day, but they no longer do it. So I didn't know if there was any time changes from people. All right. Are there any other comments or questions or agenda items? I'm not seeing anyone.
Good.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
tell Gail she's going to be getting a call from our town clerk about being a poll worker.
Okay.
Okay, I shared
I'll
your.
let her know. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. I
No
move-
objection, no objection to adjourn the meeting?
No.